Breaking tonight, a new allegation against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, just as the stage is set for his first accuser to testify on Capitol Hill this week. Evening, everyone, and welcome to The Next Revolution. I'm Steve Hilton, and this is the home of positive populism. What a blockbuster night. We are live in New York. Candace Owens is here. Jason Chaffetz is here. Greg Jarrett is here. We will bring you all the information and analysis you need to be ready for a momentous week ahead. I've also got a special announcement about positive populism coming up soon, an exclusive offer you won't want to miss. Plus, later in the show, we'll bring you a special Swamp Watch on the Democrats' outrageous hypocrisy about Brett Kavanaugh. But first, the New Yorker dropping a bombshell report just within the past hour about a second woman accusing Brett Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct decades ago. This time, it's 53-year-old Deborah Ramirez, who says Kavanaugh exposed himself to her and thrust himself towards her when both were students at Yale University in the mid-1980s. Now, both the White House and Kavanaugh have issued statements within the hour on this new allegation. Kavanaugh saying, quote, "This alleged event from 35 years ago did not happen. The people who knew me then know this did not happen and have said so. This is a smear, plain and simple." He goes on to say he looks forward to testifying this week. And the White House also responding tonight saying, quote, "This 35-year-old uncorroborated claim is the latest in a coordinated smear campaign by the Democrats designed to tear down a good man." The statement also says the claim is denied by all who are said to be present at this party involving this latest accuser, and that the White House stands firmly behind Judge Kavanaugh. But that's not all. Michael Avenatti, remember him? Stormy Daniels' lawyer. He says he now has a client who has, quote, "credible information regarding Judge Kavanaugh and his friend Mark Judge." Information Avenatti promises to make public tomorrow. All this as both Kavanaugh and his original accuser, Christine Blasey Ford, are set to testify this Thursday on Capitol Hill. In a moment, we'll bring in Jason Chaffetz, Candace Owens and Greg Jarrett. But first, Fox News Capitol Hill senior producer Chad Pergram is live for us in Washington, D.C. Chad, just until a few minutes ago, we thought we had quite a clear timetable set up with the hearing agreed to, taking place on Thursday, the accuser, Dr. Ford, testifying, agreeing to that. How does this new allegation change the timetable?
Well, the short answer is nobody quite knows. You can almost imagine a cornice, at a ski resort, about to start an avalanche coming down the hill here. That could be a real problem for Brett Kavanaugh if senators on both sides of the aisle interpret these allegations, this other set of allegations, as credible, and they need to hear from other witnesses. We thought we had this hearing set up for Thursday, probably the biggest hearing on Capitol Hill in a generation. You have to go back to Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas in 1991. But there's an old saying on Capitol Hill: nothing is agreed to until everything is agreed to. And if you start to have other Republican senators start to say, we have some other questions here, we're not quite sure, you cannot change congressional physics. Either you have the votes or you don't. The vote drop down right now in the Senate is 51 Republicans to 49 Democrats. And if they lose anybody on the Republican side of the aisle, it starts to be game over. You could imagine a situation where this starts to get very sticky for Brett Kavanaugh, especially if Democratic senators, and for that matter, Republican senators, are going to raise these other questions about this latest set of allegations in the hearing on Thursday. That's the problem for Brett Kavanaugh here. The optics are bad, and what is passed is prologue. I will go back to mid-July. There was a nominee that was just seconds away from a confirmation vote, Ryan Bounds for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And Mitch McConnell ripped his nomination, his confirmation vote, off the floor. Tim Scott, the Republican senator from South Carolina, said he could not vote for this nominee because of some racist writings and views that he had, which were controversial in college. And they pulled that nomination off the floor. The administration withdrew the nomination, and that was it for Ryan Bounds because they didn't have the votes. If they don't have the votes, you can't do anything. So, Chad, what about this question of the FBI investigation? I'm interested in the timetable as it relates to the last possible moment that this vote could be held and still get
Judge Kavanaugh confirmed before the midterm elections. How much time is there?
Well, you have 5 weeks here, and there are some on the Republican side of the aisle who say this would be great. Let's string this out a few more weeks and get it closer to the midterms because we've energized our base. And it might be tough for those Democrats who are from red states, Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Joe Donnelly of Indiana, to either put their money where their mouth is and vote for Brett Kavanaugh. But you could also see this backfiring on Republicans right now because, the Democrats might be making these charges against Kavanaugh, and they need to make a persuasive case with suburban female voters. And this could backterm if this goes too close to the election. Now, let's just lay this out based on what we know right now. If you were to have a hearing on Thursday, the earliest you could have a committee vote, which is not essential, but they're going to do that, obviously, because this is an important nomination, would be Friday. And then it would be up to Mitch McConnell whether he would want to start to run the procedural traps on this over the weekend or wait till next week. If he ran the procedural traps, a confirmation vote would come about if he ran the procedural traps over the weekend, the confirmation vote would come about next Wednesday. But they might want to take more time with this. They might say, well, we had this confirmation hearing. We heard from Christine Blasey Ford. We heard again from Kavanaugh. We have other questions. We just can't forge ahead with a committee vote on Friday. This could drag this out maybe a couple more weeks, and that's why I cite Ryan Bounds.
Right.
It looked like he was on the verge of confirmation, and then they withdrew it.
But as you say, people want this to be done quickly, but there is still a number of weeks until the midterms. Thank you, Chad, so much for all of that. Joining me now, Fox News contributor, former Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz, author of The Deep State, How an Army of Bureaucrats Protected Barack Obama and is Working to Destroy the Trump Agenda. Turning Point USA Communications Director Candace Owens, and Fox News legal analyst and author of the bestseller, The Russia Hoax, The Illicit Scheme to Clear Hillary Clinton and Frame Donald Trump, Greg Jarrett. All right, everyone. What do we make of this?
Nobody knows the truth of what happened until the accuser and the accused have an opportunity to speak publicly about it. The legal landscape is littered with false accusations. The Duke Lacrosse case, the UVA rape case. So we just don't know. I mean, she may well be telling the truth, but we don't know. Who are you talking about?
Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford, and now we have a new accuser.
Well, under advice and consent under the Constitution, it's whatever the Senate wants it to be. But every salacious story that's coming out after the hearing was closed, by the way. I mean, he's been out there since July. And now you have this new salacious thing, which I think is terribly unfair without any evidence. You read through the article and time again, it says, well, this could have maybe happened, maybe.
Right. This is the Deborah Ramirez, the new one tonight. Candace?
Look, I think this is absolutely infuriating. I am thinking that this is despicable behavior, and it's a typical leftist tactic to stall. They are constantly trying to stop this administration from having any wins, and this is the natural trail that they follow. First, they create mass hysteria by saying that if this person is elected or if this person is selected or confirmed, they're going to dial back human rights. We saw that with the whole abortion thing. Then, if that fails, they move to number 2, which is racism. They somehow accuse the candidate of being racist, which we saw with Cory Booker's absurd "I am Spartacus" moment, which in fact proved that he was not racist. And now we're at number 3, which is the Me Too witch hunt, which has been going on for way too long. It makes due process go away, and they assume that because rape and sexual assault is such a sensitive topic, as it should be, that they can just throw around baseless allegations. I do not believe either of these women. I believe this is just simply the left pulling out leftist tactics to stop this conservative.
Well, I just want to look. You called it a witch hunt, and you said you don't believe them, and others do. And I think what that shows actually is the interesting fact here. It's something that behavioural scientists call confirmation bias. Depending on your own prior point of view, you believe the evidence you want to believe. I just want to be fair about this, if I can, and you please weigh in with your opinions. But there's a couple of red flags on either side, even before tonight's news, that I just wanted to sort of point to. One on each, actually. I'm interested. It's a detail, but I think it could be important. One of the things we heard, let's just start with Dr. Ford's side. One of the things we heard a lot last week was, let's learn from the Anita Hill process. Let's not have unqualified senators ask questions. Let's get professionals in who really understand these sorts of things and have them ask the questions. And that wouldn't be the senators. But then when you get to the legal team, Dr. Ford herself, her lawyers, went for precisely the opposite. They're insisting that it's Republican senators. Now, that tells you something, doesn't it, about what this is all about?
The FBI perhaps will eventually get involved now that there are additional accusers that are coming out. But he's already gone through 6 FBI investigations. These things are very detailed. I mean, they talk to your kindergarten teacher and every neighbor you've ever had. They talk to all of your classmates and, you know, your friends and relatives and so forth. None of this has ever come up. In 6 different FBI investigations of Brett Kavanaugh over 25 years, all of a sudden, these people are now speaking out with their accusations, which they should be heard respectfully, they should be considered. But I find it curious and suspicious that he was nominated on July 9th. And here we are at the end of September, and all of a sudden these people are coming forward.
But just in the tactics of it, funnily enough, I've been thinking, especially after what Chad Program said about the fact we actually got still a lot of time to get this done, if that's what your goal is. Why not give them the FBI investigation? Just give it to them so they can't always hold that against you.
But that's not the way the Congress works. I can tell you, I was the chairman of a committee, the Oversight Committee. We did plenty of investigations, but Congress did them, not the FBI. That's just not how it works. They're there to do a background, learn everything they can, interview everybody that they can. But the advice and the consent isn't from the executive branch. The advice and the consent is solely from the United States Senate.
That it did happen that the first Bush administration did it in relation to Anita Hill.
They did do an FBI check on that. And look, the White House could request the FBI do one more background check in light of these new accusations. Chad was brilliant in laying out the 5-week timetable. There is time to do it.
It would take away that argument.
I don't see the rush, frankly.
So, but Candace, let's go to the lawyers. It seems to me that they want the spectacle.
Absolutely.
Of as they describe it, whatever it is, I don't know, 10 white old men.
And here's the thing.
Rather than what the Republicans offered, which is a female attorney handling the questioning. But they rejected that. That tells you something about their motivation.
Yes, and this is their motivations. From start to finish, this has been a giant spectacle, and we are seeing that. And I'm telling you, conservatives have to stand together, and we have to vote in midterms, because this is what is at stake. They are going to do this by any means necessary to stomp this confirmation. Think about what they've done already to his family, what his wife is going through, what his children are going through, watching these smears come out. I do not believe this whatsoever, and I'm confident that the Me Too movement has now become a political weapon, and is a political weapon that belongs to the left, because conservatives would never do this.
Well, we are going to look at the politics of it, particularly the hypocrisy. One of the things that really got me this week was the hypocrisy of the Democrats. We've got really good stuff for you on that later in the show. But, I mean, do you think at the end of all this that, I mean, it's not provable, is it? None of this is provable. In the end,
there is not a prosecutor in this country that would take these cases to court. It's not a criminal investigation. That's in part why the FBI is not involved. Right. But there is scant to no evidence. You want to respectfully hear from this person, and Senator Grassley has bent over backwards in adjusting the rules of the Senate to accommodate her. Private. Do we do it in public? Do we do it in California? Do we do it in Washington, D.C.? But you don't come into the negotiation into the United States Senate and start to say, well, this is who can ask questions and who can't. That's not the way it works.
Right. You know, as a lawyer, I'm fairly familiar with statutes of limitations. In Maryland, actually, there is none on sexual assault. However, from a practical standpoint, a case that's 35, 36 years old, it's in which the accuser doesn't remember all the people who were there, how she got there, how she got home, where it happened, the house it occurred, and she's not even sure of the time period, frankly. So that is an unprovable case, and I agree with Jason. No prosecutor in their right mind would ever take that case.
But go on,
and I'm just going to add this, and all of these women, they all demand a full FBI investigation after slipping out of amnesia of 35 plus years, right? What are the chances that on top of all of that, they decide to come out with their story to the Washington Post and the New Yorker, publications that have basically been in cahoots trying to stop this administration at every chance that they could get? All of this reeks to me. It absolutely reeks. I believe that this is completely dishonest.
I mean, the argument that's made, just to sort of put that side of it, is that something about the trauma means that you don't want to talk about it at the time. There's lots of evidence psychologically that could explain the delay.
And when you want to come out, you go to the Washington Post.
But what's interesting, I think, is that now you have the. What I think is interesting about this news tonight, and then we have another one tomorrow, apparently, thanks to good old Michael Avenatti, is that One of the arguments prior to that was this is so out of character for Brett Kavanaugh. How can you believe? Look at his whole life, unblemished and so on. It seems like that's what they're trying to chip away at with these stories.
But in the Ford situation, the so-called witnesses were there have all now issued letters to the Senate committee saying they don't have any recollection of it. So the so-called witnesses, there are none except for the accuser herself.
Yeah.
Again, the Senate's going to have to go through this, but she doesn't remember the year, doesn't remember the place, can't tell you who was there.
But it is interesting, isn't it? I thought that in the statements from the White House, particularly the White House, a very strong statement tonight, and used that word smear. I thought that shows that there's it feels like there's an anger there about what's going on.
Because they've lived it. They've lived it. This is exactly what happened during Trump's election campaign.
Well, and it's important in this case, the latest revelation, like the Dr. Ford case, there's nobody to corroborate it. Which is always something that jurors consider. Now, this is a political exercise, I realize, before the Senate Judiciary Committee, but we do borrow some principles from the law, and one of them that's a foundation of American democracy is presumption of innocence. But when you listen to people like Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, who stood in front of cameras and pronounced that the accuser was telling the truth and she believed her without ever talking to the accuser. Gillibrand's never even met her. Gillibrand must have slept through UCLA's law school class on presumption of innocence. She's really an embarrassment to the legal profession.
We'll be seeing more of Senator Gillibrand later on. I'm just going to leave that with you. I think you'll enjoy it. Thanks. We're going to keep on this, so stay there. Still to come.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news here on CNN. A brand new allegation of sexual misconduct has now surfaced against Supreme Court nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh. These new accusations appear in the pages of The New Yorker magazine, the product of an investigation by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Ronan Farrow. Our CNN senior media correspondent, Brian Stelter, is here with me alongside David Gergen, CNN senior political analyst. And gentlemen, we want to be very careful as how we approach this because we at CNN have not been able to confirm any of the reporting here. But this is significant going into a week in which we are now expecting the testimony of Judge Kavanaugh and another woman, Christine Blasey Ford, to air other accusations. Brian, what do we know? What is your assessment?
The headline here is that there is a second woman who is speaking publicly with accusations against Kavanaugh. The subheadline, very important here, is that it has not been corroborated to any great degree. In fact, there are people who have been named as eyewitnesses to this alleged incident who say they do not remember it. This was an incident dating back to to the freshman year at Yale. This student says she was at a dorm room party and things got out of hand. The story is up on NewYorker.com, and it is written by Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer, two outstanding reporters who have been on this case for a while. I know Farrow has been out in California digging into this, as have other reporters in recent days, trying to encourage this woman to speak out. Apparently, she was quite reluctant to do so, afraid to do so, but this story has been making the rounds on Capitol Hill, both among Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans. So even though we're just hearing about this now for the first time in the last few minutes, this has been out there for a while, at least for several days, on Capitol Hill. And that headline of second woman is the key detail, even though I do think we should enter this with a lot of skepticism, given the lack of corroboration and given the fact that she did not share this with anyone apparently 6 years ago, for example, the way that Ford did. Remember, we heard about how Ford talked in her therapy sessions and told her husband about this alleged encounter back in 2012. There's no similar corroboration in this news story.
I mean, you bring up a really good point, though, because according to Ronan Farrow and his co-writer here, it's Jane Mayer, they say that they know about at least 4 Democratic senators who received information about this new allegation, as well as a couple of Republican staffers. David Gergen.
Absolutely. Because the story is so serious, and because it has such obvious implications, I think it's absolutely wise to be cautious and in fairness, frankly, to Judge Kavanaugh, and in fairness to the White House. I do think it's fair to say that if Republican and Democratic senators had this information, it is strange, to put it mildly, that they would want to push on without a background investigation on Mrs. Ford, as well as this second woman, before they took a vote. It does seem to me when there are two women involved, we've always said there's no pattern here. We have this singular incident of Mrs. Ford. There's been no allegation about anybody else. Now there's an allegation. We don't know whether it's true or not. We have to be skeptical until we find out. But in the meantime, it does seem to me, wouldn't a normal group of people say, hold on, guys, with this new development, we need to step back here and be really careful ourselves before we're accused of rushing through with a candidate, in fairness to the country, in fairness to the candidate.
And of course, nothing happens in a vacuum either. In fact, I mean, Ronan Farrow did the due diligence. He took these allegations in his reporting to the White House, to Kavanaugh, and they have statements denying effectively.
Yes, and Kavanaugh is saying this is a smear. We can put on screen Kavanaugh's statement. He says this alleged event from 35 years ago, again, freshman year at Yale, did not happen. The people who knew me then know that this did not happen and have said so. This is a smear, plain and simple. Kavanaugh goes on to say, I look forward to testifying on Thursday about the truth and defending my good name and the reputation for character and integrity I have spent a lifetime building against these last-minute allegations. And Anna, that's the message from the White House as well. The administration also came out with a statement making clear they are standing by Kavanaugh at this moment, saying this 35-year-old uncorroborated claim is the latest in a coordinated smear campaign by the Democrats designed to tear down a good man. So they're saying this is political. The White House says this claim is denied by all who were said to be present and is wholly inconsistent with what many women and men who knew Judge Kavanaugh at the time in college say. The statement ends, this White House stands firmly behind Judge Kavanaugh.
I think it's fair to point out that there are people with differing recollections about what happened, and that's why it's important to have an independent investigation to figure out the truth. Can you see them now going to Mrs. Ford and having a hearing and not knowing more about this before they get there? I mean, it's sort of, how can you have a conversation with
I mean, can you see any
her?
way that this happens now without an investigation? We know the Democrats had gone back to the White House. That was our reporting earlier to say, please, can you mandate an investigation? We know George W. Bush did that during the Anita Hill hearings in order to make sure that that happened prior to the hearings on Clarence Thomas accusations of sexual harassment.
As we talked about earlier, it's only fair that Judge Kavanaugh have a way to clear his name.
Yeah.
And it's hard for him to do that if he's got this hanging over him and he has to go in and testify about Ford.
Right, he must
it's in
be,
his interest.
as he says, eager to testify.
Yeah.
I also think some Republicans are going to respond to this by saying, this is the New Yorker. This is a liberal magazine with yes, two very accomplished reporters, but reporters who may have an agenda. I think that'll be a key talking point going forward on this.
That's fair.
But what's probably most important of all, take out the New Yorker, take out everything. This woman is speaking on the record. She has stated an allegation, a serious allegation that involves a man exposing himself to her. And whatever other political noise there is, that's on the record now from her.
Does this change the game, so to speak, David?
It has the possibility, very definitely, of changing the game, and that's why we have to be so careful and not prejudge it. We need more facts and more effort. For us to sit here and opine on something that's so sensitive and has so many implications, I think it's better for us to sort of, okay, we can tell you what's obviously the implication here, but we can't say for sure what happened. We don't know.
Are you surprised that the White House is standing so firmly behind Judge Kavanaugh without knowing the facts at this point?
Well, unless you're privy to those conversations, I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah.
They did have several hours of advance notice today, which is notable. We don't know exactly how long the White House has known about this woman and known about the allegation, but we do know there were rumors spreading all afternoon and evening in Washington and New York about this. I think by the time President Trump landed here in New York at 6 p.m., he knew this story was coming. So they've had at least a little bit of time to prepare.
What about the storyboard group that went in to see him and ask him questions? You think they knew or didn't know?
You mean prepping Kavanaugh for this in recent days?
They've been prepping him all for several days now. It's an interesting question. How much did they know since it was up on Capitol Hill?
Well,
Republican senators had it.
That's a great question, but we also know that when they were in these prep sessions, they started asking him about partying and, his social life. And our reporting is he didn't like that. He got a little prickly.
Yeah.
As I think many people would. when questioned about their college days. Yeah. But one of the significant factors of this news story, when you lay it on top of the allegation from Ford, when you lay it on top of what's been publicly reported about Kavanaugh's days in college and high school, is that it is going to provoke more questions about his college days. It is going to provoke more questions about drinking and about the culture in high school and college. Those questions may be fair or unfair, but I think another story, it's going to cause more of those questions. It's
going to raise questions about his credibility as well today. I mean, what he said and what the various under oath, he made various statements that are at variance from what this story says. But it comes back, it's one of these things that the country deserves to go through this carefully and slowly even in order to get it right. Because it's not just the two people involved in their reputations. This is a momentous decision for the Supreme Court, and what happens in...
It's a lifetime appointment.
Yeah, a lifetime appointment. Next 30 years, this is resting heavily.
But of course, he is allowed to have been a frat boy. I'm sure other judges have been frat boys. I'm sure other judges, have had similar experiences at college, if you even believe this story. However, this woman says it was a disturbing experience. She says she would like the FBI to investigate, so that is significant that you now have a second woman saying she wants to see an investigation. And to your point about the rush, I was reading stories about 1991 today, about Anita Hill, about the reaction on Capitol Hill 27 years ago.
Right.
The exact same conversation was happening. Why the rush? We're right back where we were before.
I mean, is it fair to have any timeline at this point, David Gergen?
Fair to have what kind of timeline?
A timeline for getting through the testimony, through a potential investigation, to eventually put Kavanaugh up for a vote.
It does seem to me that even as we prepare for Thursday testimony, there has to be a couple of days why not only the senators and the White House, but the public can absorb this and begin to make judgments. I think we need to be a little patient with this process playing out, so that, again, I can't tell you how important I think it is to the future of the press in this country, that if he is going to be brought down, and we don't know that yet, but if he's being brought down, that the press is not seen as a complicit in that effort.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian Stelter.